Let me tell you about the worst Halloween fan fiction of all time. It's about the tragic tale of Cory and his ascent into madness. Cory has his whole life ahead of him, applying to engineering colleges and works as a babysitter on the side to earn some extra cash. One night, a boy that Cory is taking care of tragically dies, and Cory is now dubbed a child murderer. He didn't go to prison, and 4 years pass. 4 years of having no friends at all, no relationships, because who would want to spend any time with an alleged child murderer? Cory also works in the only place that he can, his dad's junkyard. And he also has an overbearing mother with creepy incest vibes. Cory is then bullied by a group of Gen Z band geeks who don't like that he wouldn't buy alcohol for them. The group starts beating him up and Cory breaks a bottle on his hand, cutting himself deeply. But who appears behind him? Laurie, the hero of Haddonfield, to save the day. Laurie then gives Cory a knife and tells him to stab the tire of the band geek's car, and then the two of them drive off to the hospital. Cory is cleaned up by Allison, who is the granddaughter of Laurie. Allison isn't like other girls woo-woo, and finds Cory's sadness to be a massive turn-on. Sadly, Allison has a mean coworker and a boss that doesn't appreciate her. The two start hanging out, but Cory is afraid to be with her. He knows fully what the people in the town think of him, and doesn't want to drag Allison down with him. The Gen Zers return and push Cory off a bridge. There, unconscious, Cory is dragged into the sewers and comes face to face with Michael Myers himself. Michael takes one look into Cory's deep brown eyes and instantly falls in love with him. Michael spares Cory and essentially transfers some of his powers over to the young man. After that, Cory becomes more confident and starts to stand up for himself more. The fear of being in public with Allison quickly fades away, and he even defends her in front of her creepy ex-boyfriend Doug. Doug, a police officer, decides to take the law into his own hands and pursues Cory after he drops off Allison. Cory baits Doug to follow him into the sewers, where Michael Myers attacks Doug. Michael, older, and now with some of his powers drained, teaches Cory how to kill. And the two go off to kill the woman that Allison works with, who got the promotion over her, and her boss. Cory and Allison have a romantic talk on the top of a radio station about running away together. Cory feels like he and Allison are outcasts and the town isn't right for them. As the two are coming off the roof, they run into Willie the Kid, the only other black guy in Haddonfield, and the host of the coolest radio show in town. Willie doesn't like that these two people are trespassing on his studio and potentially injuring themselves, open up Willie to a massive lawsuit. So Cory goes to attack Willie and Allison stops him. That night, Cory sleeps in the abandoned house of the family where the incident happened. He is awakened by the sound of Laurie in a chair, knocking it into the wall over and over again. The two have a spirited debate over the sickness of evil, and if Cory should really be dating Allison. Laurie pulls a Batman and disappears through an open window, and Cory realizes tonight is his last night in Haddonfield. He then calls Allison and tells her to meet him somewhere so the two of them can run away together. Cory goes back to the sewers where he sees Michael and says, "You got something I need." Cory manhandles Michael to the ground and says, "You're just a man in a Halloween mask," and Cory takes Michael's mask and leaves the sewers. The band geeks emerge from the only convenience store in town and see the word "Psycho" carved into the hood of their car. They see Cory in the distance riding away, and the group pursues him back to his father's junkyard. There, Cory goes full Myers on the group, killing the group in horrific ways, and wearing the iconic outfit. Sadly, Cory's father is killed by one of the band geeks. The father gives one of the children a loaded gun, and then the father gets shot instead of Cory. Afterwards, Cory makes his way back home and kills his mother. The next stop is to the radio station, where Cory gets his revenge on Willie the Kid. We see Laurie debating killing herself in the house. She puts a gun to her head, and we see a POV shot from outside of her room. The gun goes off and a splatter paints the walls. The door opens up and we see a pumpkin on the floor. Laurie says, "Do you really think I'd kill myself?" and opens fire on the attacker, who takes 2 shots to the chest and falls down a flight of stairs. Laurie makes her way down to the steps slowly, and Cory takes off his mask. Laurie opens fire on a nearby wall, showing to Cory that this gun is now empty, and tells Cory to kill her. A car pulls up outside. Cory looks at Laurie with a smile on his face, and plunges a knife into his neck. Laurie pulls out the knife, and as the door opens, it's Allison. She freezes, seeing her boyfriend gargling on his own blood, and her mother standing there holding the knife. Allison accuses Laurie of killing Cory. and drives away. But then there is a creak in the other room. Someone else is here. We see a hand picking up the mask off the floor. Michael Myers has returned. He breaks Cory's neck. Laurie hides in a closet and bursts out of the room when Michael is distracted by a microwave. The two siblings have a fistfight. Laurie easily overpowers Michael and crucifies him on a table with a pair of knives. Laurie starts to monologue as she slits his throat, but Michael gets loose and puts a hand around her neck. He seems to be transferring some of his killer energy over to Laurie, but Allison runs in and breaks Michael's arm. Frank, from the previous movie, shows up with a group of police officers and the black sheriff and see that Michael's dead. They tie Michael to the top of the car and drive him to the junkyard. The entire town knows what's going on and follows them in a massive caravan. Laurie pushes Michael into a giant grinder, and we end with the song Don't Fear the Reaper. Now, devoted viewer, what if I was to tell you that this horrible, self-insert piece of fan fiction was the actual plot to Halloween Ends? Yes, that's the actual movie. In Halloween Kills, we see Michael take on half the town, but in this one, he could barely keep up with his smaller, weaker sister, and he even got embarrassed by Cory in the sewers. Michael Myers, folks, one of the greatest movie slashers of all time, reduced to nothing more than a footnote in his final movie. This movie does answer the age-old question of, what does Michael do between movies? Because if this movie is to be taken seriously, then essentially Michael just sits in the sewers until he deems it necessary to come out and kill once again. At least in Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason comes back due to Tommy's actions. But in this movie, Michael just shows up. But I feel like Michael in the sewers just leads to more questions. How does he survive? What does he do for fun? How does he know what time of the year it is? How does he know where everyone is in the movie? How does he know that Laurie moved? Laurie's character is reduced in a very significant way as well. She's writing a book about her experiences with Michael, and she narrates a lot of scenes almost like they're just putting filler into this movie. Her character goes through a lot of crying fits mixed with some badassery and then back to crying, which obviously makes sense given her history, but throw in the previous movie where she was trying to take charge the entire time and attempting to leave a hospital after having major surgery. This movie makes a mockery of Allison too. Even in the scene where Allison sees her mother covered in Cory's blood, Laurie instantly changed from a woman who was quite literally goading Cory to kill her to crying in the corner the second Allison entered the room. And I mean, it's easily explainable, right? I mean, just be Allison for a second. You walk in the house, see that there was a clear struggle, your boyfriend is dressed like Michael Myers, and the mask is on the floor. What do you think happened? Just use your brain for a second. Nobody in this movie acts like a person. It's almost as if the writers have never had a conversation with anyone in the outside world. This is very stereotypical first book storyline, where everyone is just mean to the major characters and all of their actions are just justified. They are only motivated by their own selfishness and are just plot conveniences to pad the runtime. Nothing of Allison's attraction to Cory seems realistic. It went from 0 to 100 in a second. The worse Cory got, the weirder he sounded, and all the red flags that he was creating made Allison want him even more. She even had no reaction when Cory looked at her in the eyes and said, "I killed someone." Why do these three people stay in this town? Haddonfield is a very small town where everyone knows the history of these three characters and everyone is a piece of crap towards them in every interaction. What is the benefit of staying? Town pride? Everywhere you go, there's conflict. Imagine being Cory, and every time you talk to someone, they say, "Holy crap, you're Cory, the guy that killed that kid years ago." Why wouldn't his parents leave? Why is Laurie being harassed by townsfolk when coming out of convenience stores? And she's being blamed for the murders by everyone around her. Allison is of course lumped into this disrespect as well though, so she has no reason to stay. Now pretend that this movie wasn't a Halloween movie in the franchise, but just the story of Cory, a young man that was turned into a monster due to the town treated him badly after an accident. Then you could have had some framework for an interesting movie. You could have shown him struggling to adjust to normal life in a small town where everyone thinks he killed a child. The character Allison would have been a major plot point as well for Cory, finding love for the first time and then having her being taken away by her family, and then systematically getting revenge on all those who wronged him. That could potentially work. I would go as far to not even show that Cory didn't kill the kid. Maybe the movie should have started off with the parents discovering the body of their child and Cory standing at the top of the staircase. Maybe show throughout the movie little clips here and there of that night, but not giving away the whole thing. Maybe in the end show that Cory had nothing to do with this, and this was merely just an accident. And it even opens up the potential of having a twist ending at the end. You could have a scene where Cory and Allison are finally embracing in love, and we flash back to the events of that night though. And it shows that Cory did in fact snap and push the child off the staircase, and did mean to hurt him. That could have worked, right? I also didn't think that Michael died in the end of the movie. We see an overly dramatic scene of Laurie slitting Michael's throat and then his wrist. Michael twitches, gargles on his own blood, and slowly fades away. But the continuity is all off. And we even seen in previous movies again, Michael taking lethal wounds and coming back stronger than ever. And if the argument is that Michael transfers some of his powers over to Cory, essentially making him weaker, that means the writers just created a plot convenience of why Michael dies in the end. It's almost like the writers had no idea how to make Michael weaker, so they decided to write in the Cory character and their relationship together in order to make Michael weaker towards the end of the movie. This might very well be the worst character assassination movie I've ever seen. Laurie and Michael are not the same characters they were in the previous movies. I can argue that Halloween 2018 was a very well done reboot of the previous work. It shows that Laurie has been preparing for decades for her brother to return, that she's even gotten her family ready for the fight as well, and it shows that Laurie is a different person over the years, molded by death and tragedy but held together by community and family in a way. Halloween Kills is a prime example that bigger and louder isn't always better. That cranking the action up to 11 might not be what's best for the franchise going forward. It showed that Laurie was indeed human and Michael was even more supernatural than in previous movies. That he got remarkably stronger with every kill. And then on to Halloween Ends, where Laurie and Michael are essentially broken individuals that are just waiting to die, but can still muster up enough energy for one last poorly choreographed fight. But on that fight, around the halfway point of the movie, I thought that Cory was going to be the new Michael Myers, but mostly as imitation. Maybe he finds Michael dead in the sewers or something, which obviously wouldn't make any sense, but nothing of this movie makes any sense. Maybe he puts on the mask and then slowly starts becoming him the more he wears it, to where he can't stop himself anymore. Which made me look back at the trailer for this movie, where Laurie is essentially beating Michael in a fistfight. If Cory was the one in the mask and he's just a regular person, it would make sense for him to be stunned by a simple headbutt to the nose. But I feel as though now I'm just rambling, and much like the Halloween franchise, this video needs to end. I would say as a massive fan of the genre and franchise, this wasn't a fun movie for me to watch. It's not fun watching the intellectual properties that you grew up loving. It's not fun watching characters that you loved be reduced to nothing more than side characters in their final outing. That the last moments of Michael Myers on screen were him being crucified on a table, having his arm broken by a tiny girl, and then yeeted into a blender. I'm going to be taking a really deep dive into this movie at a later time because I almost feel like I owe it to the creators of the original movies. Halloween was something that was really beloved by horror fans and just fans of good movies back then. It might sound weird in 2022, but there was a time not too long ago where horror movies were really good. Where some movies like the original Jaws and the original Halloween were seen as cinematic gold. Now, over the years, obviously, horror movies have gotten more silly and goofy with, Jason and Freddy, but to their core, they were never laughed at characters. They were never reduced to nothing in their own movies. It's kind of sad seeing that all the things that I grew up loving and all the intellectual properties that gave me such joy growing up are being destroyed by hack writers trying to do their own self inserts to move a franchise forward in their own direction. I mean, look at everything that Marvel's doing now since Endgame. Now every time a Marvel show or a movie comes out, I'm not thinking, oh cool, what exciting character is this going to bring to the universe? I'm thinking, oh great, what character are they going to shit on now? And I guess the only hope of this franchise having any new life into it is if it's someone from my generation. Someone that's not motivated by gender and sexuality and race, that wants to actually write a good movie. Someone that's not going to make a self-insert fan fiction or plot convenience characters to move the story along. And maybe someone that will watch the original movies and say, hey, maybe Michael killing 1,000 people in a scene is not really the best way to go. Maybe it's kind of dumb. Maybe it doesn't really serve the plot going forward. Because if you look at it realistically, After Michael killed all those people in the town, how are you supposed to believe that he could be killed by anyone? We watched the man get beaten with baseball bats. We watched him get stabbed. We watched him get shot. He's taken fatal wounds before. And even in the final fight with Laurie, she stabs him in the chest with a giant butcher's knife. And Michael even presses it forward by moving up towards her. So, as a writer, you want to convey that Michael getting his throat slit and his wrist slit is enough to kill him. But now, all of a sudden, in their final movie, the man is mortal. And I don't even know if it's confirmed that he was trying to transfer some of his powers over to Cory. It wasn't really explained that well at all. And I really hope the writers don't come out and tell us what really happened, because anything they say is going to be worse for the franchise. In the final movie, Michael was given supernatural powers to look into Cory's deep brown eyes and see his troubled past of everything. Look at all the times that Michael has lifted up someone by one hand and looked him in the face and stabbed them with zero hesitation at all. And that's the weirdest part of this movie of why? Why did Michael spare Cory? Why did he look into his eyes and see all of his past problems? Is that something that Michael has done this entire time? Has Michael just been killing people based on if they're a good person or a bad person? When Michael killed Allison's coworker, he had a very long time to look her in the eyes. Maybe this coworker that essentially got a promotion by sleeping her way to the top, maybe she had a troubled past too. Maybe she was a damaged and broken person and realized that this is the only way I could get ahead in life. I'm sorry, I really don't feel like a character that's kind of annoying on screen deserves to die. I mean, Willie the Kid was kind of a jerk to Allison and Cory, but essentially that was just a knee-jerk reaction to seeing two people on his roof jumping off. Yeah, the guy was pissed off. I would be too. If I have someone on my property screwing around like that and could potentially open me up to massive lawsuits, yeah, I'm not going to be all friendly with them either. I'm going to be upset. I'm going to be like, oh, hey, it's you. Well, you are a screw up. Of course it is. It's you people. It's just nothing felt like a Halloween movie here. Like I said before, with the plot of an actual standalone Cory movie, this was essentially it. This was almost exactly what I said. If you remove Michael Myers from the movie entirely, and you make this a 100% fan insert movie about Cory, having Michael in this movie really didn't make or break the movie. As weird as that sounds. I mean, Michael didn't even show up until around the 40-minute mark. Isn't that kind of weird that his final showing you barely put him in it? And then you put Michael just essentially hanging out with Cory, going on murders together, showing him what to do? When has Michael ever had a friend? And if you're going to say the guy that broke him out of prison, that's one thing, but that movie didn't exist in the Halloween franchise, I'm pretty sure. I mean, from what I've gathered, the way this timeline works is that there was the first and second movie, and then a time gap, and then this one. 4, 5, and the other two with Jamie Lee Curtis, those didn't exist though, because obviously Jamie Lee Curtis's character died, and they were essentially alluding that it's been 40 years since Michael has returned. So yeah, those other movies never took place. I wanted more for this movie, and I think every Halloween fan of the franchise and the genre wanted more. There's really not a lot of movies to be excited about these days. I mean, the other day I saw Smile, and I made a full length review on that, though. It didn't have the scenes to really make a lasting mark on my life of it. And Halloween did. The original Halloween franchise, even, the silly third one that people really didn't like that much. A lot of people don't really know this, but the original Halloween franchise wasn't written to be a Michael Myers one. That's why the third one had nothing to do with him. It was supposed to be almost like American Horror Story, where every year there'll be a different Halloween movie about a different character or something like that. But then, obviously, fans loved Michael Myers so much, so the writer said, okay, well, we have to put more Michael in this movie. Then they had 4, 5, time gap, and then 6 and 7 with Jamie Lee Curtis. And then another time gap where she died, and then they decided, okay, we're going to make a new one, but we're going to forget all the other ones existed before that. If the final thing we saw of the Halloween franchise was a 2018 one, where Michael's burning up alive, or Jamie Lee Curtis delivers the final blow to him, wouldn't that have been more satisfying? Halloween Kills was okay. It was, like I said, mostly an action-packed movie, but we didn't need it. It didn't progress the franchise. If anything, it hurt it because it showed that Michael is essentially immortal. And now we have Halloween Ends, where It almost feels like Michael dealt with such massive smoke inhalation from the first one that he was a broken guy. He couldn't get oxygen in his lungs. He couldn't kill like he normally could. He couldn't do these things. But at the same time, in the same movie, he was able to lift up the girl with one arm and stab her to the chest, and he was still able to do things. He was still able to break Cory's neck so easily. He was still Michael Myers, who was able to deal with so much punishment and keep coming. And then randomly, the writer said, "Okay, well, it's getting towards the end of the movie, so we got to kill him off." Maybe the movie would have ended better if they were at the junkyard for the final fight. That Michael did die in the grinder in the end, but it was not through a cathartic yeeting him in there. It was through an actual fight where the characters work together and defeat a much bigger foe than them. Maybe having Cory realize that, oh my god, Michael's going to try to kill Allison. I can't let this happen. I have to kill him as well, or something like that. And then the three of them triple team Michael Myers. Wouldn't that have been a better ending? Would it have been better than him being stabbed on a table, throat slit slowly, and a ridiculous monologue being given? Nothing of this movie worked, and nothing made sense, and I feel as though now I have to put a final bow on this movie and call it quits for the day. But if you stayed with me this long, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate the amount of views I've been getting recently and the traffic I've been getting on social media. It's one of those things that you have no idea what you clicking on that video means to me. And I do thank you very much for that. And I do hope that I could produce a lot more content going forward and things that you might find interesting. But I am pretty new to this, so if you could send a message to me just letting me know how I did, what could I improve on, what you took away from it, that would really mean the world to me.